Good morning to you again, St. Lucia. If you're just tuning in, our guests are here, and I can tell you, you can't see it, but I can. They're enjoying the music. They're enjoying a little Usher. All right, well, I'm very, very pleased to say that we have three wonderful guests on the show this morning. We have Dr. Kim Gardiner, all right, specialist. We also have Delia Samuel, and Delia, as I mentioned earlier on, is the author of a book, Against the Odds. And we also have Crispin D'Auvergne. Did I pronounce that correctly? That's a little lovely. I did. So good morning to all of you. Good morning.
Good morning.
Lovely to have you here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now we're talking about autism, and it's something that many of us have heard of, but many people know little about, especially how challenging it can be if you're a parent of someone who is autistic. All right, it's a life-changing thing. And some people, when they come out the other end, they see it as a gift, which is fantastic, right?
Yes.
All right, but it's I'm just going to give a little something here. It is a lifelong developmental disability. On its own, autism is not a learning disability or a mental health problem, but some people with autism have accompanying learning disabilities, learning difficulties, and sometimes mental health issues. All right. I'm wondering, let me start with you. Dr. Kim Gardiner, let's start with yourself. What is your interest in autism, and how would you say you're a specialist with regards to this?
Well, I wouldn't say I'm a specialist, but I'm a pediatrician, and I'm the director of the Child Development and Guidance Center, and it's the primary place in St. Lucia that delivers diagnosis and intervention for children with autism. So we provide speech and language therapy, occupational therapy, physiotherapy, psychological intervention, pediatric care for our local children diagnosed with autism.
And I suppose you would do that for all children with all different ranges of different things, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
All children not meeting their developmental potential.
Right.
So I guess in the area of developmental pediatrics.
Okay, lovely. Okay, we got that established. Now let me go to you, Delia Samuel. Okay, what's your interest in autism?
I am a mother of 2 children with autism.
2?
I have 2 boys, both with autism.
Wow.
The first one is 10 years old. I would say his autism is more moderate. He also has a speech and language impairment, and he's a genius. My second one, he's 7-year-old. He has severe autism.
Wow.
He is nonverbal. He does not speak. I would say he's developmentally delayed. Very severely.
I like the term developmentally delayed.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
that's good.
Yes, and I would say he's my 7-year-old baby because he's at the level of a 2-year-old.
Okay, all right. And then I'd like to hear from you, Crispin, in terms of your interest, please.
Well, my son is autistic, moderately so.
Moderately. Well, I tell you, with the 3 of you, we're really going to have a full discussion because there's a wealth of experience. And what we want to do is we really want to illustrate what autism is and what it's like to live with it for the listeners and for the public, because we really need as much awareness as we can. We've just had Autism Awareness Day. Was it on the 2nd of April?
Yes.
And we're celebrating throughout the whole month.
Yes.
And sometimes, what I would like to see, because I don't have an autistic child or anyone, as far as I know, in my family, but one of my very, very, very good friends, my son and her son are just a few months apart. So therefore, when she had him, that's how I got introduced to autism, and it's something which is very, very dear to my heart because of it. So, let us just launch in now, all right?
Yes.
With regards. By the way, I do need to say something to you, Kim. I'm going to call you. Is that okay for me to just call you Kim?
Yeah.
And I've got this message here, and I'm going to read it as it is, all right? Oh my gosh! Oh my gosh! You have on the show. You know what? I think I might have just created a bit of a boob here. I think I said something which is incorrect. No, I haven't. It's not for you, Kim. It's for Delia. There you go. That's what I'm thinking. I've got a bit of a senior moment here. Delia Samuels. Oh my gosh, was the best math teacher I have ever had. She's the reason I love maths. She's my hero. and the standard by which I measure all teachers.
Oh.
Isn't that wonderful?
Oh, well.
It's so cool that you have her on. Isn't that lovely?
Thank you so much.
I can tell you afterwards who it is. I won't do that on air, but I'll tell you afterwards. Isn't that lovely?
Yes, yes.
So your sons are very lucky to come to you.
I'm grateful for them.
Yes. All right. Okay. So for my first question, all right, that's something that really sticks in my throat at the moment. I suppose science hasn't yet found a way to break this particular barrier, but a lifelong, when I hear lifelong developmental disability, that's like, wow. And where are we with regards to improvements with research? Where are we at the moment?
I think a lot of research is being done, but as you said, it's still frustrating that we haven't found the answer. I think the more we dig, the more questions we have. We seem to be finding many more associated factors that contribute towards autism, or risk factors, I guess, that there's genetic predispositions, maybe there's some environmental trigger that happens, different things in the pregnancy, the paternal age, maternal age, just all sorts of different risk factors, but I don't think we're closer to getting to the answer. Probably because there isn't just one answer, but it's multifactorial in terms of what causes autism. But I do know that in terms of intervention, we know that the earlier that we can identify a child who's going to be on the spectrum, and the earlier we can provide intervention, that the better the outcome will be. And the goal is always to get them to their maximum potential. Each child is going to be different, and what their maximum potential is different, but you want to make sure that you get them there.
But a key thing that you say, their maximum potential, that's ours perceived. What we think, because, in time we don't know what that maximum potential might be, surely, right?
Yeah, but it comes out eventually. You if you begin to accept the life, like as a parent, you accept your children, you accept that life of autism. As you embrace the life, the qualities in the children come out, their abilities, because you focus now on their abilities and not their disabilities.
Exactly.
And so you see them coming out. And sometimes you are surprised. Like my oldest son, he just surprises me sometimes. When he was 7, he came to me and he told me, "Mommy, I think 7 minus 16 is minus 9. I'm saying, where did he get that from? Where did he get that from? So sometimes he surprises you. They do surprise you. So yes, you never know what the maximal potential is, but it will come out if you accept the life. And I wanted to say something about where we are, where autism is. The rates of autism cases on the increase.
Yes.
So presently in the US, it's 1 in 68. And that was 4 years ago. Rates have not come out for this year as yet. So there is a rapid spike, and it is of tremendous concern. Why? Because autism was primarily thought to be a genetic disorder. So if there is a rapid spike in something like the flu, which is an airborne disease, there's no problem. I mean, it's tragic, but it's normal. But a rapid spike in a genetic disorder is abnormal. So autism has moved from a disease that was largely inherited to a disease that can be triggered.
And environmental, because I've got a statistic here. In 1987, there were less than 20,000 severely mentally disabled children in the US, right? So we're going through the spectrum here. Now, there are over 500,000.
Yes.
That's just a couple of years, right? Now, part of this number is due to the diagnosis of autism, so there's much more autistic children being diagnosed. And also, again on there is the diagnosis of bipolar disorder in children.
Yes.
Which for me is worrying when I hear this, with regards to the counselling type of work that I do. And number of children under 6 receiving antidepressant drugs. That's, for me, I'm not a scientist, but the reading you do and the things that you hear from parents and people, it's tripled in the last 10 years.
Yes.
So what are your views? I'm going to start with you first, Crispin, in terms of what I've just said, and we go back. What are your views? Because you have a little one, and I'm sure you would have done more reading, because whenever we're faced with something, we learn, and that's how we can get to acceptance, as you've said, Delia.
It's a bit frustrating in the sense of trying to pin the actual cause, because at one time some people were dead set that it was caused by vaccines, yes, and how they were being preserved or something of the sort, and they were convinced that's what it was. The research has been done into that, and it has certainly been inconclusive. It certainly hasn't pointed towards that. But in terms of the numbers, when you hear that, for example, let's say 10, 15 years ago, the figure was like in the US as well, like 1 in 150. Now it's 1 in 68. It really makes you wonder. It's you can't wait for science to get down to the answer, and then because finding the cause of it may provide a clue to how to treat it more effectively. But we kind of keep waiting, trying to anticipate what trying to figure out what it is, because it's really, really baffling, and it's in a way and like I said, frustrating, because you don't know what's causing it. So even if there's certain interventions you can make, you don't know how to prevent what can be done at this point in time, to minimize the possibility of future cases.
Yeah, that's very true. And what do you say, Kim?
I agree with everything that's said. In terms of the vaccines, was an important point to bring up, that it was flawed research that brought that was a possibility, and subsequently other research has come out that says that it's absolutely not. So we're doing a lot of what it's not, but as he said, just not coming to the finite answer
as to what it is. And I suppose when you're parents of children like that, and also for you because you look after the children, you're in between, aren't you? Frustrated because you would like to hear what it is and how it came about, but also to be able to live with it, because that's what we want to talk about, the living with it, and also some of the stigma, I'm sure, that's related to it. Because I saw this video, all right. It's been made to convey the experience of living with autism, and it was done by the National Autistic Society, by the way. And what it's like for an autistic person, the noises that they hear, the flashes that they hear. Really, you've seen it.
That's so true.
And I thought it was a very, very good video,
Yes.
Because it gives you an idea as to why they might even jump or jerk or seem confused and bang their yes. So maybe you could illustrate for us what it's like for a child who's like this. What is it really like?
Okay, I can tell you from my point of view. For example, when I first brought my children to the supermarket, they were quite young then. With all the hustle and bustle, my oldest son, he just dashed right back out.
He ran away.
Out into oncoming traffic.
He didn't like it.
He couldn't deal with it. They would sometimes, they would rock back and forth, put their hands over their heads. They would scream. They would bite to me because they cannot deal with it. They would want to leave. The colors, the sounds, the bright lights, it just overstimulates them.
Is it too sensory? Is that what it is?
Sensory,
okay.
Right. And then you should see the stares around me. Like sometimes my youngest son, he bites his shirt, and I have heard people tell me, "Is your son hungry?" Or they would see that sometimes they would throw themselves on the floor in the supermarket, and you would see the stares, or they'd venture to tell me what I should be doing.
Like you're a bad mother?
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. And this is because they don't understand. Now I used to get angry about that, but right now I say, these people have not walked in my shoes. They have not walked the road that I am walking, and I seriously believe that if they were walking that road, they would not be making these comments. And that is why I think it's so important to promote autism awareness. Let people see what we go through, and that when you see a child in the bank screaming, that you don't say the child is spoiled.
Hey, don't assume either.
Exactly.
Well. Crispin, what about you? Give us a...
Yeah, well, my son, I think sometimes when I hear Delia talk, I think perhaps I've gotten off a bit lightly.
Comparatively speaking, yes.
Yes. My son has his challenges, certainly, and I think a lot of in his particular situation, some of the signs of it are not necessarily being clear as to what is socially appropriate. I remember, he might have been around 8 or 9 years old, and we were visiting someone at the hospital, and there was a gentleman sitting there, a total stranger, and he went and lifted up the gentleman's trouser leg to see what color, what socks he was wearing. So the gentleman looked at me oddly then, and I quietly told him, and he seemed to understand that, and I think, well, that's the other thing, people I had a situation where a very, very good friend of mine visited me one day, and my son was up to his stuff, and the guy pulls me aside. He said, Crispin, I have to tell you, you guys are spoiling your son. He really, you guys have spoiled him. I'm very surprised. So I had to pull the guy aside, explain to him, and said, oh, I didn't know. Now my son is he doesn't like us to tell people that he's autistic, right?
Yeah.
But I've explained to him, look, that when people understand, when they know, and sometimes they're a little more understanding, they may not fully understand what autism is, but they get a better sense and recognize that it's something that's not the usual, and will be a little more tolerant. And that's one of the reasons why I think it's so important to promote the awareness.
But isn't it that we're almost stuck between a rock and a hard place? Because on the one hand, you can understand that he would want that sense of being able to tell someone himself, not to feel different. All right, we are in a society that is very sort of judgmental, and people like to form their own opinions, and they judge you. So on the one hand, you can understand that.
Indeed.
But on the other side, it's so important for the awareness.
Correct.
So then he can feel safe if somebody or everybody knows that he's autistic. Do you understand?
Yes.
And
Indeed.
the kindness is what we need.
That's the reality. He's sometimes told me, I don't want to be autistic. I don't want to be. I want to be normal. That kind of thing.
And do you tell him what is normal?
So well,
what is normal?
I make him understand that. I make him understand that it's nothing that he needs to be ashamed of. That
Good.
And so on. And fortunately for him, the school he's at, and he's been there for a while. It's a regular school actually. He's pretty well known in the school. I think every teacher knows him, every child knows him basically. And they basically accept him for what he is.
So what we're hearing here is a completely different range of all three children, because I know you have two.
Yes.
Correct.
And in terms of different ways of caring for them and supporting them. But Dr. Gardiner, if, let's say, as you said, early intervention, and I'm going to ask the two of you again, the two parents in here, whether you managed to do the early intervention, but how would a parent begin to recognize that maybe they need to speak to their GP? What are the signs?
I'll get to that in a second. I just wanted to reiterate what you said, that autism is a spectrum, and there's very different capabilities within that spectrum. And I always say, if you know one child with autism, you just know one child with autism. You can't generalize, and you can't say that, okay, now I know what autism is. So it's hard to build awareness for something that you can't say exactly what it is as well, but that it could be anything. It can manifest in many ways. But we start seeing, as we said, autism at the core of it is a difficulty with social communication. And if you start thinking of younger children, between 9 months to 12 months, when you're starting to show your social signs, you're smiling, you're waving bye-bye, you're recognizing your parents, making good eye contact.
Okay.
Those are the early signs in 12 months and under. And then between 12 and 18 months, that's when your first words are coming. You're using gestures, you're pointing, you're doing other communicative things. Those are the foundations of language. And quite often children with autism don't get off the block with those simple and foundation parts of language. Some will, but some won't.
Dr. Gardiner, I want to stop you. I want you to continue, but I want to ask our two parents now, with regards to what you've just illustrated. Just tell me a little bit about what your children were like at that early age, from 0 to, was it 18 months, you said? Yeah.
My oldest son, I didn't think anything was wrong with him.
He was the one you call a genius, right?
Yes. Yes. So he had some repetitive behaviors. He would do the same thing all the time. Now we're looking at 0 to 18 months.
Yes.
Can I extend that to 2?
Go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So he when he got his first words, he lost them. So that was the first time he lost them. Now again, I didn't know about autism. Until he was in a daycare when he was 1.5 years, and the teacher there told me, you need to remove your son, we cannot cope with him, I think he has autism. And I said, my son has autism, are you crazy? Well, isn't that a disability? And so, because I didn't see it, I was in denial. there were little things. He had feeding disorders. He couldn't feed himself. There were certain things that he should have been able to do. Certain
At that age?
milestones he should have reached.
What age was that?
That was between 0 and 2.
Yeah.
That he should have reached in terms of potty training, instead of the words, in terms of eye contact. He had none of that.
So I just want to interject something, because remember, good thing about the television and radio shows like this, we can hear about these things. But I can imagine whereby a child like that could be told off, could be shouted at. By now you should be able to, why are you wetting yourself, for instance?
Yes.
I just put that on you. You should have told me you want to use the toilet. And even the mounting frustration between parents as well, that beginning to break down the relationship. So you illustrate just a few things, and to me it's just wow, and that's your first.
That's my first.
So,
and then the second came with even more disabilities. So the second, he failed the newborn hearing test, and subsequently he failed all newborn hearing tests, and he was constantly sick with feeding disorders. They both had sleeping disorders and so on.
What does that show up like when you say a sleeping disorder?
Getting up all the time.
How do you manage? Because babies, you don't get any sleep with babies anyway.
That is it. I was just frustrated. 1 hour sleep a night, like every 2 hours my oldest son was waking up, and when they're 2 years apart, and they both had sleeping disorders. I was a sleep deprived mom. I was angry. I would tell you I hated my life at that time. And yes, I was angry with them. I was angry with God for giving me 2 children with special needs. At that time I was doing a PhD in mathematics, and yes.
Did you finish?
Yes, I did finish within time. Yeah. And it was hard. 1 hour's sleep, and I did it, and then I was able to get through these stages to acceptance.
All right, I want to hear your story now, Crispin. All right, what about you? Because it's just mind-blowing. Just listening, it's mind-blowing.
Yes, at around 7 months or so, we noticed that he had he tended to have a fixation for rotating objects like fans, fans, like he tends to tear the fan, that for endlessly, and he didn't. While he, at 7 or 8 months, he was making the little sounds like dada and so on. He took a while to start really talking. He didn't, perhaps he wasn't as rapid as other children in terms of putting his he's putting words together and so on. But I mean, he did speak, and the thing is, when he did speak, though, he spoke pretty precisely, actually, we thought. And but also the issue of eye contact, he wouldn't always he would very often would not make eye contact. And so you would speak to him, he would not really be looking at you, and
you can see how that could get into a scenario of you're being rude. This child is very rude.
And also, and if I can extend to a little after maybe a 2 plus, he would, if you ask him a question, he'd answer you and then go to a totally different subject after that, right? He just, nothing really, just go to a totally different topic, right?
Wow.
So these were some of the, the signs that we began to pick up. And in fact, one of our relatives also mentioned it, had noticed it, and said, look, we really need to get this checked out.
And that's okay. So these are the ways that you, and so therefore, with what they've just illustrated, let's just go to Crispin. Dr. Gardiner, would you say that at 2.5, when you're thinking a relative tells you maybe you need to look at that, would that be late intervention or would that be early intervention as far as you're concerned?
2.5 is a good age. Less than 3 really is the goal.
Okay.
Closer to 2 is even better. The first, in early childhood development, we talk about the first 1,000 days. That's the 9 months in the mom and the first 2 to 3 years outside. And that's really when the most rapid brain development is happening, and patterns that set you up for later in life are happening. Brain development and growth happens after that, but the majority of it and the most rapid happens in that time. So if we can get in on you and try to help with early intervention to develop more typical patterns of communication and development in that time when your brain is most accepting of it, it's a good time to do it. Afterwards, it's just a lot harder to gain developmental goals. It can be done, but it's harder. So you want to get in less than 3.
All right. Well, what we'll do, we're going to go to a short break. When we come back, welcome back to the show. And during the break, we're just having a little bit of a laugh about cricket and how it unites. It really does, doesn't it? It's not just about men. It's not just about women. It's all of us, right? We're feeling very proud right now.
Yes.
All right. So, something that I'd like to ask you as well. Here's, I just want to throw this one in because I just want to hear your thoughts about it. All right. Because we really want to understand it as much as we can. Some recent research, there's always research, right? And sometimes it's flawed and sometimes it's great. But it's looking at how anxiety, depression and several pediatric disorders, including autism and hyperactivity, have been linked with gastrointestinal abnormalities. And it's looking at how certain gut microbes influence and affect the functioning of the brain. What do you think about that? I hear a few.
I have heard that before, and I have to tell you, both of my children have gastrointestinal issues. My oldest son had reflux, severe reflux as a child. And as a matter of fact, when he was born, he stayed in the special care unit for 4 days. And they call it severe because not only would he bring up the food, but whenever he brought it up, he would have apnea. So he lost air. So they sent him home on a monitor. So, and that was one of the reasons he got up so often during the night, because I could not feed him large quantities at all. I had to elevate his bed so that it was on a slant. I had to hold him up on my shoulder after feeding for at least half an hour before I put him down.
My God.
So that was reflux. He overcame it, and he was always in the ER with gastrointestinal issues. He always had gastroenteritis. I think he used to be there at least 3 times a year. So much so I even knew what medicine they had to give him, you know, so that he would be better. And I think he started feeling better when he was about 5 or 6. And of course, my 7-year-old, well, that is, he has had surgeries for that. He has a gastro. He's followed by many specialists, especially a gastroenterologist. He has to see him every year. He had a duodenal web, a membrane on top of his duodenum, which could not support the food. So he was vomiting constantly from birth. He vomited everything. So he had a major problem with that. So there could be a possibility. I'm not saying it is the cause, but there is a possibility.
Yeah, it sounds like it listening to you. What do you say, doctor?
The brain is the center of everything, and if you think of autism being a neurodevelopmental disorder, it drives every muscle and every function and everything in the body. So if there's atypical development of the brain, to me it can be logical that any part of the body can be affected, including the gut. And you often find digestive or motility, that's movement issues, constipations quite regularly related with autism. That can be for a variety of reasons, for sensory issues as well. They just don't like the feeling of going to the bathroom or sitting on the toilet, or the release that you have to have with having a bowel movement. And there's the motility, how the gut moves and how food is passed through. So yes, I think that there can definitely be a relation. I don't think it's the total cause, but there's a lot of associated symptoms and factors that tie into. I also think it's related to the discomfort some of our children feel. So there's a lot of nonverbal children that can't tell you what's going on with them, but you'd note spikes in certain behaviors in them. And then I do think for a lot of them, some of it's gut related, painful abdomen and stuff like that, I think.
And what about you, Crispin?
In this case, I can't point to any indication in that regard. I don't recognize any problems of that sort of in my son. Never have.
For your son,
and he's I think
he eats well, does he? I thought you were going to say he eats well.
Well, maybe he wouldn't eat well if I had to padlock the refrigerator, maybe. But in other words, he has a very, very healthy and normal appetite for a kid his age, and he's in fact, as a kid, if he ever threw up twice, that's a lot in his entire life.
But the reason why that particular bit of research interested me is that you hear about how the gut is another brain by itself. And so that's why it interests me, but this is all very recent and new. It doesn't mean it's conclusive in any way, but I find it particularly interesting. All right, so now how do we support autism? All right, so normal Joe Blow on the street has no idea. They are not sensitizing their mouth in any way. Anything can come out of their mouth. All right, but how can we support you, all of you?
First of all, you see exactly what we're doing now. We have to start by doing this. The masses need to be aware of what we go through. And I sincerely believe that if this is publicized and people get to know and hear firsthand from the parents what we go through, they will be more willing to learn. Last night I had one of my formal book launches was at the convent last night. And
let's not skim over that. Your book launched. Give us the title and everything.
My book is called Against the Odds, Inspiration for Parenting Children with Special Needs. And it is really a tool. It is the target audience, parents, caregivers, educators, medical professionals, anyone who wants to become autism aware, and gives them tools as to how I have made life work, how I have moved from guilt, anger to acceptance, to embracing this life, to seeing it as the greatest blessing in my life, how I have made life work, how I can smile and rejoice, how my children have blossomed. And it also teaches people about autism, what to expect. So there are lots to learn from this book. And I was making the point, so last night my own sister who was there, and she said when she heard my story, she knew, she has seen me taking care of the children, but there's so much she did not know. And she said when she heard me last night, she says she just wants to be educated, and she's an educator. And she says she believes all educators should know about this, especially as it is on the increase. So she said she just wants to know.
And I think you make a good point. All right, not just educators, but we all need to know, because otherwise we're going to be casting judgments. We can have a child. It could be a niece, a nephew. You could be a teacher, a child at school. It could be anywhere. And they do something which is, let's say, in quotes, different, right? And you'll judge that as though they're not listening to your instructions, or they're being a little bit unruly, or whatever negative that people might come up with. It's important that we're educated, really is.
Yes.
But it's a brave thing that you do as well, to share your story in that way. It's a brave thing.
Thank you.
How long did it take you to move from angry and no longer believing in God to acceptance?
I was in anger for a very, very long time. I think I really began accepting in 2012. My first born was born in 2006.
Okay,
so
quite a few years.
I was there for a long time. And the other point I was making is that the name calling has to stop. The go-go from people who call, that's what they call.
Really?
Oh yeah, call children with autism go-go, retard. That is how we can support each other, by not calling names. And parents hide the children because they don't tell people my child has autism, has special needs, because they're ashamed. They're ashamed of it. I was at that point. I don't want to bring my children outside sometimes, especially you bringing out a child who's biting. Once I brought my 7-year-old to the playground, and he can't speak, and he wanted to go up a slide, and the lady was in his way. He bit her, and the lady said, "Oh, good thing I got my shots." So
that's what she said.
That's what she said to me. I took my child and I left.
That's so heartbreaking, isn't it? We can be so cruel as a race of people.
Yes,
the whole, wherever, not just in St. Lucia. But would anybody agree that we can be a little bit freer with the horrible things that we're going to say here? Less diplomatic? Yeah, everybody's nodding. Everybody's nodding.
Indeed.
What about you, Crispin?
I have, again, those little odd incidents. People, my son running up and down and so on, why is he running up and down, that kind of thing. And in some cases, people have, approached me to me, I saw your son, I say, well, okay, he's autistic, and say, oh, they don't really, in some cases already know what it is, but they understand it exists. And again, they tend to be a little more accepting. And in fact, there's some places where he goes, like, he's, apart from his school, there are a couple of places where he goes where everybody knows him. right? They all know him, and
which helps.
Yeah,
which is a good thing,
and he's quite a personable young guy. He's quite personable. I mean, he speaks to people very, he's very freely talk to them, and he has people he particularly likes, and he'll go look for them and chat to them and so on. And so he has found acceptance by people who know him. But very often this is the situation where people who don't know and they see him doing maybe what might look like something strange, they think he's, eccentric or was mad or something of the sort, right? And that is where I think, it becomes a little uncomfortable for him and for us as his parents, because sometimes we have to explain, and other times, well, depending on the situation, you decide to just move along.
I'm going to ask you this, all right, because you're the man here within the ladies. I'm going to ask you this question. How do you, because Delia's already explained a little bit, what about you accepting, how has that journey been for you?
I think for us, again, it wasn't, we didn't see anything very, very severe at the beginning. We saw little things that looked a little unusual, but it didn't, it wasn't a situation where, he had what appeared to be anything severe. Initially, at around, that early stage, in fact, again, he had gone to a preschool as well, and they told us, well, we don't think that this is the best place for him, and so on and so on. And
wow,
we had to get him on.
That's hard, isn't it, on parents?
We wanted to get him diagnosed. At the time, it could not be done conclusively in St. Lucia. We had to go to Barbados to get it done.
Really?
Okay, yes, we had to go to Barbados.
What do you say about that, Dr. Gardiner?
Things have changed now, and I mean, it can be done here quite conclusively. But people say we think, but you need to schedule an appointment in Barbados and so on, and that's what happened with him. And for us, we were hoping that was not the case, because nobody wants to, if they can avoid it, to have a child who's quote unquote
special needs,
right? And so, but the thing is, we got indication here, so we got a kind of a bit of a heads up on that. And we took him to Barbados, and we got a conclusive result, and we brought him back a couple of years later, and confirmed the diagnosis. And it was, I don't think we had a problem accepting it as a problem as to what to do. But at the time, even back then, the center, which Dr. Gardiner now heads, some work was done there with him in terms of helping to make better eye contact and helping to to converse and so on. And so we did see some improvement, which we were grateful for. And he still not perfect in communication. He's still struggling academically at school and so on. But and that's the other thing too. There's some people you can look at immediately, even and you can sense that there may be something, quote unquote, that's different. But but in his case, if you look at him, he just looks like a normal teenager, and it's only when you see him do certain things that you might recognize that that he's different, quote unquote, right?
Yeah.
And so for us, it wasn't that difficult. It was sometimes just a case of frustration as well, recognizing that in St. Lucia at the time there still is a limit to what could have been done in terms of the education system and so on.
But I want to make it specifically about you, all right? Because you've said us, in terms of your relationship has obviously survived, right? But as a man, sometimes as a man or a woman, you can have dreams.
Sure.
Before the baby's even born, before you even got pregnant, you could have dreams for your child. You envisage
Indeed.
what this is going to be like.
Indeed.
And so that particular journey, in terms of where you are now.
Well, yes, that's an important point, because again, we always, I had, my firstborn.
Your firstborn.
Yeah,
okay.
my only son actually.
Right.
And I obviously had dreams for him. Indeed,
He was going to be a cricketer, right? West Indies.
given the way West Indies was going at the time, I wasn't quite sure that's what you.
Yes.
But certainly for academically, in terms athletically and so on, you had dreams, and you realize that there might be that path might take a different path, right? For due to that reason, and I guess I always used to tell people that the only thing I really worried about in life was my son's future. Okay. Because you want to see him be able to especially if as your only child, you want to see him be able to take his place in society and not have to worry too much about what would happen to him when you're no longer there.
Yeah,
and that has been, that I think
That's true.
was for a long time was my greatest worry, and to some extent it still is.
Yeah.
But I think I've accepted it a bit more, and and I trust that that God will provide. I will do the best that I can, to try to make sure that he has as easy a path in life as I can provide for him.
It's funny, when he said that, Delia, I saw your face, and I'll ask you the same thing in terms of, the dreams that you would have had, but for now and the future, do you worry about the future?
Yes, sometimes I do. It's like shattered dreams. You have big dreams for your children, and they are not what you expected. It's shattered dreams. Your life is turned upside down. What I have learned in my acceptance stage is to build new dreams. They are new dreams.
Yeah, that's
that
so
doesn't
nice.
mean that they may even be better than the old dreams that you had for them. So, and my children, as in terms of if something happens to me, I think of that, what's going to happen to them. But I have a good family network. I have 7 siblings, and I know they will come all out to take care of them.
Okay, that's good. Dr. Gardiner, all right, now to you, because you know many, I'm sure, many. And what are your frustrations as a doctor with regards to really being to make the impact that you would like to?
I guess I feel frustrated for parents at different points in their journey. I wish I could get all of them to the stage that our parents are at today, the acceptance stage. But I have to give them time in their denial and their anger and their grief. But sometimes that impacts how much progress their child will make. Because if you're still in denial, you're less likely to take on advice.
Describe that for us, because I can see the parents really nodding here. What's it like when a parent is in denial in that way?
Well, first of all, intervention happens once a week or once every 2 weeks based on the limited resources that we have and the number of children that we have requiring intervention. So when you come in, you're sort of becoming a co-therapist. So we teach you for 45 minutes, get you down on the ground with your kid. And then you to go home and do these things and go and practice and try to build things within your child. But if you're not really accepting that this is something that will help my child because you haven't accepted the diagnosis, then you don't go home and do the work, and you come back 2 weeks later and you're still in the same place.
And it impedes the child. My goodness.
Once we have a parent who is turned on, magical things happen. And from week to week to week, you'll see little goals and little gains being achieved. So I think for me, but I understand why they are where they are, because you have to let them have that anger time and denial time
and grieving as well.
Exactly.
There will be the loss of the dream, whatever it was.
Exactly.
Do parents get that sort of support, counseling and therapy in St. Lucia? How much support do they get?
That's also my biggest frustration. As a pediatrician and the primary intervention person, we can't be everything to everyone, and we really need the support network for the parents. And we've been trying and hoping to really build a parent support group and parent support network. There's many volunteers after the St. Lucia Autism Awareness Conference who want to help and support, but we need to get parents together rallying for the big cause of autism, both for awareness but support of each other.
And about how many autistic children and adults, I suppose, do we have here in St. Lucia?
I can tell you the stats for my center, and in the last 10 years we have about 70 children on our books. 70, but there's many more. There's adults living with autism that are not captured in that data. So we don't have good national data, which is something else we need so that we can come up with statistics and monitor if we're increasing.
But what if you were to, a guesstimate on your part, what would it be?
Probably similar. I think the whole world is seeing the same statistics, so I don't see why we would be any different. I think we're being exposed here to everything that everyone else is, so my guess is it would be quite similar. But I do know, just in the 8 years I've run the center, that I think we're getting our nurses who've been trained at 18 months to do a screen. We're getting more referrals in of children who are just showing subtle signs, but they're picking it up already. We're definitely getting more referrals in for children with social communication problems. So make about 10 new diagnoses a year on average is what we're doing now for the last couple of years, when it was maybe 5 or 6 or 7 children before that. So just within the center, we're increasing in terms of diagnosis. But we did also institute training for better recognition. So I can't tell you exactly why.
All right.
Seeing more, but
all right. Look, we're not scientists here, but I just want to throw this one out, okay? And each one of you can give your own hypothesis as to what might cause autism. Right. Just and nothing sort of inflammatory, scaremongering, but just your own thoughts about it, basically.
I think it's something in the environment. I live in Minnesota, and do you know Minnesota is the state with the highest autism rates in the U.S.?
I didn't know that.
Yes, we have the highest autism rates. I don't know why, but I really believe it has to do with some chemicals in the environment. I think that we are inhaling things that we don't even know.
Well, I know the other two haven't spoken yet, but I actually am in agreement with you on that. That's one of my personal pet peeves in terms of what's going into our bodies, this toxicity.
Yes.
The levels of toxicity that we are now breathing, eating, consuming, all the rest of it. But, Dr. Gardiner, go ahead.
I think for me, I do honestly think it's a combination of factors. I think there's probably you have this predetermined DNA or something that has the potential, but now whatever's in the environment or something external is triggering that. Whereas before we would have gone on not turning on that switch or turning off that switch because we didn't have that exposure to whatever it is. And it could be, and it probably is environmental. Something is triggering and turning on, as you said, that switch, and that's why we're seeing more of it now.
I am of similar persuasion with Dr. Gardiner on that one. I think it's a combination of the two.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I would agree. I'm sure there are other factors.
Yes.
But, I just think that when we look at not just autism, we look at cancers, we look at so many other things. We cannot, let's just take in terms of pesticides, the things that they spray our foods with. How do we know? Because our bodies are not really predisposed to be able to deal with anything but what is natural. As long as it's a chemical, the body thinks it's a foreign agent, doesn't it? Am I wrong, Dr. Gardner? So I do think that we need to look at these things a lot more. And research in terms of maybe, okay, this is a question I really wanted to ask. How is it that autistic, we're talking about children predominantly, but adults as well. How is it they're so brilliant in some respects? I mean, absolute genius. What is it that happens to the brain that they have this genius that comes out, off the scale, isn't it, really?
Yes. It's not the norm, rather the exception that we have geniuses. But there are quite a few in certain areas. It's thought, so remember I was talking about brain development up to age 5. So you kind of build your networks and your pathways of the things that you're using, and those you're not using, your brain kind of prunes it away. You're not using it, you lose it, in terms of those networks that you were born with the potential to do. But I think they found with autism that a lot of that pruning doesn't happen. So a lot of that taking away of some of those networks doesn't happen. So you have extra brain cells in areas to do with mathematics and music and some of the other things. But it's also why you have sensory issues, because you have too much input in that area, and also why you may have gut issues. So there's actually a difference in how brain development happens and how brain development gets pruned based on experiences. It doesn't happen in the same way as a typical brain.
Interesting.
So I think you're born with that potential. Maybe all of us are, but then we don't use it as much at 1 and 2 and 3, so it goes away. And then with the autistic child, it doesn't. And then they develop that. It becomes an area of interest. They're predisposed to having it being a repetitive or focused area, and they just go for it. And then it just becomes something that they're very, very good at.
It's funny you said about this repetitive aspect to them. Apparently when people are autistic, quite often they love patterns. You mentioned it in your son, but I'd love to hear some of the patterns or the routines that your little ones have.
They thrive on routine.
Okay.
So for example, my son, my 10-year-old, he loves writing a schedule. And if at, say, 8 o'clock, he has to go upstairs and bathe and get dressed, you better believe at 8 o'clock,
Really?
he is going to do it. And if I tell him that he has to spend 10 minutes bathing, he has a timer. So he puts it on 10 minutes. 10 minutes is out of the shower. He's out. And it seems to have a built-in clock. Like he goes for a nap. 3 o'clock. Mommy, it's time for a nap. He goes upstairs and he naps. At 5 o'clock, he has to get up. He gets up at 5.
There's no delay in.
No, I
staying
don't
in-
have to go and say, oh, it's time to get up. It's there, you know. Yeah, so they thrive on routine. And if you do anything out of sequence, they go berserk.
Ah.
Yes, they don't understand. There was once that my 7-year-old came home, and it was winter, so I usually take out his coat and then his shoes. That day I decided to take out his shoes, and he screamed and he wanted his shoes back on. That was why I didn't do it in the same order.
My gosh, I can see Crispin there, almost as though blown away. What's going on?
No, I was about to ask if I can borrow her son's body clock, because my son has very little concept of time, actually. And he will not spend 10 minutes in the shower if you allow him to. He's probably spend 45 minutes in the shower if you allow him to. And he says that time as a concept, no, he has very little.
Very little.
That,
I thought you was going to say he's exactly the same.
No,
I think
no.
you're talking about the same child.
That was not the opposite.
Just to bring it to the point, that's something we do preach, that schedule and routine is important. That helps with children making progress, especially if they're having difficulty, when they know what to expect next. Because you and I may be able to work things out intuitively with our eyes or with our bodies of what's coming next. We can kind of see. But the child with autism may not be able to. So if they have a hint with a visual schedule or a timetable, they know what's coming next. You feel less anxious about it. I think all of us as adults, I always say each of us have a little autism in us that
Exactly.
we thrive on routine and structure and knowing what's coming next. And I just think that autism is the extreme
Of that.
Agreed.
All right. Well, we've got maybe just about 2-3 minutes to the end of the show. All right. Yeah, it's gone very, very quickly, hasn't it? And so I'd love you all to say what you would like to. All right. Who's going to go first?
I'll start.
All right.
I hope for more than just awareness, and I hope for acceptance for our children with autism as well as any developmental disability. Because I think some stats came out from the UK that 99% of people knew what autism was, but of the parents of children with autism, only 20% felt accepted. So knowing it and accepting it, for parents to feel accepted, it's not there.
It's huge.
We have to move beyond just knowing. And they hear autism, yeah, I know that, but no, what does it really mean? And what is it like to walk in your shoes for one day and not making judgments? So let's be aware and let's accept. As Dr. Samuel always says, they're different, but they're not less.
It's so true.
And then I have a word for the parents. I want to let them know that they have untold strength within them. That if they have been blessed, and I say the word blessed, if they have been blessed with children with special needs, it's because they are super men and women, and that they can do it. They have all the love in them. And then all our children need is unconditional love, and you will see them blossoming. That is how acceptance starts, by loving your children and loving yourself. Even before that, love yourself. Know that you're not a bad person. There's no curse because you have 2 children with special needs or one or whatever. You are beautiful. See yourself, accept yourself, unconditionally love yourself, and impart that to your children, and you will see them blossom.
And too bad to anybody who doesn't see it that way, right?
Yes.
Amen.
Well, I guess I'd like to say that I'd like to see not just autism being accepted, but also being embraced. Right? That's part of the wider diversity of society. Because
Well
I
said.
think, but I also think that apart from acceptance, I'd also like to see a little more action at the national level in terms of the support systems being put in place to better support them. I mean, it has started to happen, but for example, in the school system, you know, and there are teachers, for example, you know, who train in you know, to deal with kids with special needs. But I think the given the numbers that are showing up, and not just in autism, but in other areas, I think there's need for, you know, an even more solid structure and you know, and systems, and, you know, in place to kind of support that. I think that's something.
Yeah, I agree with you, so that it can be much more inclusive. By the way, does anybody know if we're getting more than $250 a month from the government for a child with special needs?
200.
It's 200. It's not 250. That cannot do anything.
And actually, Dr. Bird, on an interview yesterday, she says right now in the new budget, it's on the increase. They will give an increase, but she did not specify how much.
What? Maybe $10?
And I hope it's
Oh
more than
my
that.
gosh, $200 a month? This is just not enough. Look, the next time we have to have a lot more time. I do hope that I can get you back on the show. I know you're going to go back, Dr. Samuel, but you know, I have to applaud you for your courage.
Thank you.
You know, as Crispin, you said it yourself. You know, comparatively speaking, it's a real road that all of you have travelled. We're lucky to have you. So compassionate.
I'm
All
lucky
right.
to have them.
and we're lucky to have both of you here illustrating your very personal stories. I hope that our listeners have learnt something from this. But mainly I hope that we're much more compassionate and understanding and giving, you know, and less judgmental, please.
Yes.
And we can all of us work together to change the way things are right now, I think. Thank you very much, all three of you. Thank you.
You're
Thank
very
you.
welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, there you go. That was, I tell you, my heart is warm and heavy all at the same time, you know, when you hear about these things. It really is for us, you know, to care about everybody, you know, and to send some love out to parents who are really working very, very hard, you know, for their children to feel normal. And as far as I'm concerned, that's what they are, because if they're not normal, then neither are we. Because every one of us has something. Come on, let's be honest, every one of us. So thank you again, Dr. Kim Gardiner. Also Dr. Delia Samuel, okay, studying that PhD, phenomenal with those children as they were and still are. And we have Mr. Crispin D'Auvergne. All right, thank you very much. What we're going to do, we'll go to a break. And after that, we're going to have May Wayne. She's going to stop in for a little chat for a few minutes.